Welcome to Stand By Please.
With me, Antonia Collins from the Bamboo Manager Project.
And me, Jackie George from Sharjah Performing Arts Academy.
In this podcast, we talk all things stage management. Join us and our guests as we try to answer the question, what is your stage manager really thinking?
Hello, Jackie.
Hello, Antonia. How are you this week?
I'm good, thank you. The sun is shining. What a massive difference it makes. The sun's always shining where you are, though.
Yeah, but you get different types of sunshine. But it still makes you smile, for sure. Antonia, we've got a special guest with us this week. I'd like to introduce you. We have the lovely Lou Platt with us. Lou Platt from Artist Wellbeing. Hello, Lou. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Lou, so can you start us off? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what got you to what you're doing today?
Well, what I do today, maybe I'll start there and go backwards. So I kind of created this title of Artist Wellbeing Practitioner, and that started forming in 2012. And what that is it's a mashup of my 17 years experience being a drama psychotherapist. So I studied at Central School of Speech and Drama. It wasn't Royal then when I went, it is now. And before that, I went to Birmingham University and did drama and theatre arts, and was a co-founder of a theatre company called The Other Way Works here in Birmingham with 5 other brilliant women, and that's a company that's now led by Katie Day. That's a Birmingham-based company because I'm based in Birmingham now. I went to uni here and I didn't leave. Well, I left to go to London and then lived there for 3 years, couldn't find any work, and then came back to Birmingham and then worked in adult and adolescent mental health, specialising in eating disorders and addictions and trauma recovery. Mm-hmm. So let's think, where are we? So we've got the psychotherapy part of my background, and then the working as a performer and writer, deviser in kind of studio scale, site-specific theatre. And then I also trained to be a clinical supervisor at the London Centre of Psychodrama. So I also supervise other counsellors and psychotherapists' work. And those 3 things, so psychotherapy, supervision, and kind of artistry, I mashed those up and developed the role of Artist Wellbeing Practitioner.
Sorry to interrupt. Before you go on, can I ask, was in your writing, devising, creative side, was well-being and how a room is conducted and how we conduct ourselves in that room, was that always at the centre of your practice?
No.
Oh, no.
Okay. No. I, retrospectively, so let's think a little story that signifies this. So made a show based upon autobiographical material. It was based on my relationship with me and my mum. And when we first worked with it, we kept it very true.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like my director, Katie Day, at the time. Well, not at the time, but after I started developing this role of looking after artists, especially artists that are working on autobiographical or challenging traumatic material, we were both like, God, if only you had been able to work with us then, because it would have made us feel a bit more safe in the process, in terms of using autobiographical material. But no, when I was making theatre, no, we didn't talk about well-being.
How does your work, Lou, then connect with the work, or does it connect with the work of an intimacy director?
Oh, beautiful question. Oh, I get to talk about Ita O'Brien. So I work really closely with Ita O'Brien. Oh. She founded Intimacy on Set. And I worked, so Ita was making a show drawing upon some of her experiences, and I think it was 2015. So I supported her and the young people that were devising and R&Ding this show called Does My Sex Offend You? And that's how we met. So I was supporting her in the mental health and well-being of that process. And then Ita has also then just brilliantly gone to develop this role of intimacy coordinator and director. And so now, actually, Ita, she works a lot in TV and film, so that's kind of where some of my work is moving over to. She beautifully identifies where there might be mental health risk, because around intimate scenes, there usually is some form of kind of emotional well-being, mental health, for many reasons, because of the content, or maybe just because being intimate with a stranger on set is in itself quite intimidating. Ita often brings me in, and we are really beginning to dovetail our work even more consciously now. So for example, Ita was working on I May Destroy You, Michaela Cole's series, and she had the brilliance of speaking to the producers and saying, I think we need to support the cast and crew for this. So I was brought on to support that production. So that's how it can align, because I think with intimacy coordinators, and I haven't just worked with Ita, I've worked with some of the people that work for that company. I think it creates a package of care and quite a holistic approach. And also the intimacy coordinator, the artist or the crew may become emotionally triggered, and the intimacy coordinator doesn't have the skills or the qualification or the expertise to know how to hold and process that safely, which comes from the training as a psychotherapist or the supervisor and the supervision that I'm in as well.
How do you begin to introduce well-being to the rehearsal room?
Somebody that was core part of the team, and it was a show that had a lot of traumatic material based upon sexual assault, and a beautiful show, but they had to watch it every night. And so this was a company that I supported. I went to kind of followed them on tour occasionally. Every few weeks I'd run a group session for them to just process what they'd been going through. And we ended up doing this kind of little piece of work with this stage manager, and we imagined putting a protective screen around them whenever they set up and got in, because it went on tour, that they would kind of put this ritual of putting up this. It was invisible, but they put it up, and actually that act of intention of protection of the ritual, which is all in theatre anyway, isn't it? The power of ritual. I remember this designer saying, it's followed me around on tour. I still have it. So it can sometimes just be making it conscious and making it intentional can do a lot. So that's a little story about protecting that person at the back of the room.
I love that story.
Just silence both of us there. We both went,
which is rare.
Goodness.
But I absolutely love that story and the simplicity of it. And like you said, just the intention and how that protected the individual has just given me goosebumps. That's incredible.
But protect the individual, you protect the collective, because then that individual isn't dropping down into their nervous system, becoming activated, becoming stressed, anxious, which is contagious. Because then, as we are animals, ultimately, we respond to when anybody else is stressed out. And then we don't work from our core, we work from what I call our parts, which kind of, the stressed part or the perfectionist part, because they're stressed, they've got to get it really right. But it's not so creative, I think, that place.
It's not creative. And Antonia and I have spoken before about that perfectionism traits that you see quite a lot in stage managers, and how that can be quite detrimental actually to the process, because you become obsessed on this. And I say, wiggling a little gap between my fingers and not the bigger picture. So I think as a part of the team, stage managers, we can be our own worst enemy in not protecting ourselves. And like you say, if you don't protect the individuals, then that bigger picture, that bigger collective becomes a much bigger issue, really.
You asked the question though, how do I introduce well-being to a rehearsal space? Or how does one introduce well-being? It's about just reframing the focus, I think, for everybody, and saying this can be included in a really cognizant and conscious and mindful way, like true mindfulness, not like just filling in one of those books with coloured pencils. That's not mindfulness at its most powerful.
Really?
I love
it.
I'm on my second owl of the day.
Yes, and I'm really aware that the model you described earlier is so perfect, and in my perfect world, every show, and we wouldn't have to quantify the scale of risk or trigger or vulnerability to do with content, that we could have access to, people like yourself, and that we can protect that room and that team. But the reality, I think, is we're far away from that. And I always feel that, as we talked about it earlier, we were saying we always rush for time, and we'll go, this is good practice, but we'll fit as much as we can into our working day. And it is a change of mindset, isn't it? And I've said to Antonia before, with that change of mindset, you have to make time. And how that time is like the biggest commodity with that pressure from producers or whatever it may be.
And I think we're talking about change here. And one of the things I'm really keen on talking about at the moment is the idea of long think, long change. Like with the Western culture, we are steeped in the message that we have to have everything now. And actually, I think these changes are going to take a long time for us to reap the rewards of them, because each generation of producer or director or stage manager, they learn by what they witness, right? And actually, I'd say that's one of the most fundamental learning avenues. Is not the training. The training is this like incubator, and then it all feels. It's kind of correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know that world very well, but this is what I imagine, is that then when you get into the real world, you're then influenced by people that have been in that culture for a long time. And then you want to, basic human needs, as one of them is to belong, to feel like you're included and that you're part of a gang, a group, a herd. And so if the others are doing it, your nervous system will tell your brain, do what they do, because then you'll be accepted. Otherwise you won't get the job or you won't be chosen. So we are going to have growing pains. So it's how do we enable spaces and ways of working that acknowledge that this change is going to hurt, but it's going to be worth it. And we might be doing it for the next generation, and that has to be acknowledged, which is really hard to hold the faith in something that you don't see, you can't pick your fruit straight away.
Some of the practices that aren't so conducive to your well-being are taught in drama school for stage managers. That's undeniable. That idea of you've got to stay later to write the rehearsal report, you've got to answer a text message from an actor on a Sunday. Some of those things are built in drama school. And actually, I think some of that's easier when you get out into the professional world, because you are then surrounded by people who are like, well, I've got an hour's break now, so I'm going to take that hour's break. So, but then you've got a different thing at play then, because when you work professionally, then of course, you've got that thing of, oh, I've got one job, but I need to get another job and another job. So you're always looking to make the best impression that you can. And I think somewhere for stage managers, that's wrapped up in a whole bunch of perfectionism, doing more. Look at me, I've made the best props list in the entire world and I've spent 6 hours on it. And
I think some of them are built in training, and I think that's dependent on who's doing the training. But I do believe it is generational, and that this slightly sweeping statement, but when we look at a certain, like a generation of theatre makers in whatever role, I'm not going to limit it to one particular capacity. And we've seen that with the whole, I think with Me Too, and people are complicit in staying silent. And I think it is going to take generations for the next generation to say and call it out if it's involving them or not involving them. And don't get me wrong, it's not just that generation that the blame lies at their door, but it will take time. But I think it's those certain generations maybe that are involved in training, and I think it's what I think as training anywhere in the world that oh my gosh, I was going to sort of try and solve it all then in one sentence, but
go for it.
Okay, here goes. The problem with certain performance training is that it models itself too much on the industry. And when the industry is flawed, we're just recreating those flaws. And that's to do with what's the objective of the person doing the training. And if it's completely self-led and self-motivated, then that's the fruition of those problems for me. Solved, done, I'm off.
Well, I guess, and so therefore, how do we introduce wellbeing to a rehearsal space? So it begins in training, begins in A-level, begins GCSE, and it's happening a little bit more now, but bringing in people like myself and other practitioners that are doing similar stuff as a consultant, have a strand, challenge it, have proactive inquiry around it. And people have to feel safe in doing that, because if we feel threatened in any way, i.e. our role is threatened, or we're not going to get that next job because we want to do it differently, we have to call that out. But as you said, it's hard to call things out if we don't feel psychologically safe. How do we generate a sense of courage and confidence in the younger generation who, and of course they can be a bit more fly by the seat of their pants, can't they? Because they, broad brushstrokes, younger 20-year-olds have less responsibilities and financial commitments, and they aren't even thinking about a pension yet, although 20-year-olds out there do start thinking about it now. Just to add that in, that'll be good for your future well-being. Invest in yourself.
No, funny enough, when you were talking about it earlier, so my son is a 20-year-old stage manager. I mean, he's 24, and he would worry way less about saying something or doing something now than I would have worried at 24. Yeah, absolutely. He's like, no, mother, that is wrong. We need to change. He's got that whole kind of, which I adore about him, change the world vibe that I think a lot of 20-year-olds have. He wants to do a Jackie. He wants to change the entire world by tea time today. Thank you very much. But yeah, no, I'm very hopeful because of people like him in his generation, where they're not afraid. They're not afraid to say, nope, I think this is wrong. Thanks very much. I think it is a good thing. But like you said, it's going to be an ongoing challenge, isn't it? It's not going to be solved. And there are still behaviours that we see that, would be better if they didn't exist, really.
Well, I think there's a whole funny, even the language around it, the word solved, I find interesting, because it's like the word fix. Like if someone comes to me as a psychotherapy client and says, fix me. And I'm like, classic meme I become then, and, you know, basically print it on a t-shirt and give it to them and say, you're not fit, you're not broken. You know, it's about care. It really is duty of care, because I find that way, if we look at this as a problem, it can very quickly become quite binary, and it can become quite role like stage managers have this responsibility to look after the people's well-being within the team, and it's either the stage manager or the producer, and sometimes the director. They're the three that well-being responsibility falls to. And of course it does, because in the nature of their role, it's kind of, they've already got hooks in their role to hang that kind of well-being jacket on. Not a jacket.
Okay.
Okay. And but I think it needs to be the whole. I don't think a stage manager should be responsible for other people's well-being. I think everybody should be empowered to take self-responsibility, and also everybody should be thinking about each other within it.
Slight light bulb moment for me when I said to you, okay, so how are you going to do it? How do we introduce wellbeing into a room? And actually, from my sort of logistical head, and I can see, you know, if it's a tangible thing or a process, I can apply that. But for me, it's slightly harder, or it takes me a bit longer to think about how can you foster that dynamic in a rehearsal room. But actually, when you talk about it being, it's everyone's responsibility, and we're much better at risk assessing a cable across a door, running across the floor of a door, than risk assessing somebody's vulnerability in a room. And, you know, it's one thing you teach when you teach sort of health and safety and risk assessment. You say, we are all collectively responsible. If you see a cable, unplug it and run it another route. So that's even that smallest shift to say, you know, absolutely. And some stage managers, we can be our own worst enemies sometimes, and we'll want to be the mother, the best friend, all of those roles, and look after everyone and make sure. And I think firstly, as a sector, we need to say, well, we can't solve everyone's we do want to solve things, because I think inherently we're solution finders.
Yeah.
We want to solve everyone's problems, but actually the moment we make that slight shift and go, let's look at it like a risk assessment, let's just readdress it, let's make it everyone's responsibility, and look at how we make it better instead of solve.
Great. And I think having a proactive mindset is very helpful. So for example, when I'm brought into rehearsal rooms, when that foresight's already been there to bring in a wellbeing practitioner, that there's no role conflict then, because my role is to strike the wellbeing bell in the corner, and hopefully it'll just in the center of the room, and hopefully it'll just ring throughout the process. That's the hope. Is that I ask questions. I ask people, if you become wobbly through this process for whatever reason, whether it's something inside the process or something outside the process that might affect you being in the room, who's your support structure? And people give everybody a postcard at the beginning, and people write down okay, these are my two caller friend, friends that I can call upon. This is so you kit them, and this is well-being can be really ethereal and about culture, but actually it can be really damn practical.
In the next section, we'll start to discuss the different states of stress and how we respond to those. For some of our listeners, they may recognise some of these states, and you may not want to listen to them right now. So this is a good place to pause, take a walk, and when you're ready, and if you're ready, please come back and join us later.
What do you do when you're stressed? What helps you? Because somebody else might need to be under a bloody weighted blanket, and that bring them back into a sense of self and what we call ventral vagal, up your nervous system into the nice place. Or it could be I need to go for a walk, or people can start identifying their own care package. And it's when people identify their own care package is that they then don't feel like they're being done to when they're emotionally vulnerable, and that they don't feel like they can meet their problem or their state of overwhelm with the safety net that they've already, right at the beginning of the process, spent some time thinking about.
I love that idea. It's such a simple fix. You write down, what do you need in those moments?
And there's neuroscience behind this as well. It's all good.
But going back to what I was saying before, we ask people, their medical conditions, do you take any medication? But we don't ask them and what would you want in a time of stress or whatever it may be? But we want to know, if they're gluten intolerant.
Yeah. Well, yeah, intolerant to gluten, or it might be intolerant to stress.
Yeah.
And sometimes those two symptoms are very similar. Mm-hmm. They come out in hives, right? Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't ask people the question, they won't think about it. And so some people are like, I've never asked myself that question. Even in their personal life, they haven't gone, oh, what are my anchors? I guess they're called ventral vagal anchors. You can Google
ventral
that.
Ventral vagal.
It's a nerve in our body. We all have one, no matter who. So that it crosses all ages, race, gender. We all have a nervous system. So working with the nervous system in rehearsal space is fantastic because it's very inclusive, and everybody can benefit from it. Pretty much. Of course, some people's nervous systems have gone a bit, but generally.
Wow. Antonia, what's your ventral vagal anchor? I was just thinking, what would mine be?
Say it again.
Ventral.
Pop it in the chat.
Pop it in the chat for me, please, Lou.
Ventral anchor. There you go. It's in the chat.
Okay, here we go. Ventral vagal anchor.
Well done, Jackie.
Thank you.
Mine, exercise.
Running, that's your thing. Yes.
If I can't, as long as I can put my running shoes on, then everything is okay with the world. And don't mind what the weather's doing, doesn't matter.
Great. So that's a what? So ventral vagal. This is quite ventral vagal. Ventral vagal anchors. So I'm drawing upon a practitioner called Deb Dana here. So I just want to honour her. So you can it's polyvagal theory, but ventral vagal anchors can who, what, where, when, and what brings you back into your ventral vagal, which is your part of your nervous system where you it's like it's the conductor of your inner orchestra, and it's like that my sympathetic nervous system, which is like fight, flight, freeze, but can also be like action, get stuff done. Can I swear? Get shit done. Yeah, get shit done. That part.
That's not swearing.
Fine. So it kind of, that part of our nervous system is really helpful, and then even further down our nervous system is dorsal, which is down in the gut, which is about rest, integration, digestion. It's the bit that helps you, nervous system that helps you go to sleep. And if we're in ventral vagal, that part of our nervous system is kind of like, let's work all together, guys. It's like our insides are working as a team. But if our nervous system spots a threat, and within the theatre industry, it's a stressful place, and dynamics within room, even though they have really great intentions, can remind our very simple nervous system. It doesn't get nuance. It just, oh, you look a bit like maybe that person that bullied me, or maybe that tone, or maybe the smell. I dropped out of ventral vagal and go down into my sympathetic, and that becomes the leader of my orchestra. So now imagine an orchestra that's led by really highly strung, very, very tight, very frightened, also very anxious, but therefore very perfectionistic, because if we get anything wrong, fucking hell, we're going to be shamed. So let's just keep it really tight and go faster and do more, and let's play for 7 hours straight. Like, that would be really stressful, wouldn't it?
You've just described half an hour of my day this afternoon.
Yeah, excellent.
Well,
So,
you've just described hundreds of people that I'm thinking of now.
Yeah. So ventral vagal anchors, these are the things that bring you back into a state of calm. So the sympathetic nervous system, which is that one I was just describing, the tight one, can go back down, and it can be used in a really productive way, but you don't get overwhelmed. And by the way, if you keep getting stressed, you then drop further down your nervous system, and then you start fawning, which is like, I'll do anything to please you. It's like, yes, director. Yeah. I'll take off my clothes. No, it's fine. What do you want? Do you want a cake with that? You know, that's fawning. And then go further down, you go to dorsal, and that's when somebody's just like zoned out. You know, when they're in the room, but they're not in the room. It's,
oh, wow.
Lights are on, but no one's home.
No one's home.
It's like really hard to think, lots of yawning, just... you know, in its extreme state, it's passing out.
Wow. Do you know what though? I think as a teacher and trainer, this is all a huge wealth of new information to me, and I absolutely love it. I'm going to make some time to go away and find out some more.
Well, I think I want to do some training for theatre practitioners on the polyvagal system. So,
well, please sign me up straight away, because I'm thinking those states you're just describing, I could stand in front of a room of learners in theatre and be like, well, you're there, and you're there. But just because we talk about, they've got, again, we talk about the practical. They've got this certain learning requirement, or they've got this, and then we don't recognise their emotional state. But just by you describing that, I can go, oh, okay, so they're obviously in that flight, fright, or freeze moment.
But even I just want to reframe a little bit more.
Yeah,
it's not emotional state. It's their nervous system, which affects our nervous system, affects our thinking, our feeling, and therefore our behavior. So if we can recognize what's happening inside our body, and which sometimes we can work out what's happening in our body, how we're doing emotionally. So if we're anxious, that might be telling us I've dropped down into my sympathetic, my heart lung, you know.
Mm.
I think some of this, though, Jackie, we have been doing. We just didn't know it was called that. Because, so in a lot of my courses, Lou, when I'm teaching, we talk about, in terms of management skills and leadership skills and those kind of things. But we talk about ideas to keep yourself on track. And they're all very practical things. Unsurprisingly, they're all terribly practical. Like, what do you do to de-stress? What do you, so some of that does exist in our practice, Jackie. We just didn't know it had a real name, and we didn't know what the thing was behind it. But I think the problem for a lot of stage managers, especially when you're starting out, is that because you're seen as the neutral person in the room, so you're not the director, you're not the choreographer, you're not the producer, people tend to come to you for advice. And actually what we need to try and do is help stage managers become signposters to help that person get some real advice, as opposed to try and give the advice ourselves. And certainly when I was a younger stage manager, just like Jackie says, I would have thought I could give the advice to people. And it was only really as I undertook more training myself that I realised I should stop doing that, and I should be saying to people, no, you need to go and talk to somebody else or do something more practical, as opposed to try and absorb everybody else's problems. I think that's where it goes slightly awry for stage managers.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine so, because what it sounds like in those moments is you become a rescuer. There's a part of self that wants to make it better for that person, and of course that's okay. And in that but that's going to lead to, absorption and rescuing is a via super highway to burnout and resentment. Because when we're burnt out, we are so depleted that our cup does not overfloweth. But we've lost the cup, let alone the liquid. It's like getting blades of grass and licking the dew off it. Wow, what an image. Weird.
Yes.
But what I was going to say is that I think in those situations so let's say you're a stage manager and you've got somebody coming to you with a kind of emotional, maybe relational, so it could be how they're relating to themselves or somebody else in the team issue. It's personal, isn't it? It can feel really, really personal because the personal and the performative in this industry, they are so overlapped. It's not like Steve the Postman. Anyway, I always talk about Steve the Postman. I don't know who Steve the Postman is. Anyway,
but it's because with this so often, like we've talked before about how, when you look at a company, we're a funny old bunch because we're a group of people, then we take everyone away from their home surroundings and their familiarities and the things that they're used to, and then we'll put them in a different city for a week at a time for a year. And we'll make them live out of a suitcase and they'll be living in somebody else's house. So it becomes that sort of family unit, isn't it, as well, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you can become the surrogate parent, which might be...
absolutely.
Yeah, which might be, especially if you're older than them, that's an easy, transferential role. They transfer the parent, either their real parent or the parent archetype onto you, and a stage manager might love that. They might love being in the parent role, but it then puts them into child role. And what you want to do in a professional, let's say we're working with adults here, is we really want everybody to be relating to each other as much as possible, adult to adult, and being aware of their inner child and being aware of these inner parental roles, like the rescuer or the pleaser or whatever. And just having a sense of like, okay, I could go into that, but actually that gets me stuck in a dynamic that then just plays out. And then we go back to one of our earlier things we were saying, is that change doesn't happen. It's because we're all relating with our parts of self rather than this core that is... that if I draw upon internal family systems therapy, which I use as one of my core therapies, we all have a self that is, it's 8 C's. Let's see if I can get them. It's confident, it's compassionate, it's curious, it's creative, it's courageous, it's connecting, it's calm, and it's clear. And we have that all within us, no matter what. But our parts, our perfectionist, can eclipse it. And we can't reach our sense of calm, or we can't reach our sense of creativity because the perfectionist is in the way. Because there's another part behind the perfectionist that's really scared about being seen, being judged, being shamed. And we work in the performance industry because we want to be seen, right?
Well, not us, no.
No, but other people in the room, yeah. When that bleeds out, and this might be where we bring in the need for really good boundaries. And first of all, that word boundaries is used a lot in the narrative of well-being. And some people, I think, use the word and they don't even know what it means to them, to setting boundaries. But I think there needs to be a boundary between what your role, and absolutely strive for excellence. Absolute precision and excellence. I'd never tell anyone to strive for perfection. But I guess if things need to be placed in certain perfect places, like they have their place, that's excellent, and it's on point. But when that bleeds over into the more interpersonal areas of work, i.e. how I spell a word, which discludes a whole load of neurodiversity.
Absolutely.
And it becomes very uninclusive and very shaming and really, really high anxiety, which is going to, of course, then bring the inner perfectionist on, which is just, that is a protective manager of self. We have to be mindful about where the appropriate excellence striving in the role then bleeds into something that it doesn't actually need to be there, that you can be a fallible human. And yes, you can. I think a stage manager, of course, can make a mistake. We hope that they will never do it, of course, because we want the machine to run smoothly and for everybody to feel like they can rely on each other. But even stage managers need to know that if they make a mistake, and they are absolutely striving for excellence, and it's a human error, that they can fail safely.
What is your sort of ideal scenario dream for accepted practice for the future?
It starts before the rehearsal starts. It has to be in the preparation. I think the more proactive we are in caring for one another and each other within the industry, the better it will be. And I mean that in both senses of the word better. I think we need to do risk assessments that include a well-being and a mental health element, and also know how to then support that. What procedures need to be put in place, i.e. if there is challenging material, and there usually is, that there is thought about bringing in a practitioner that can look after those people involved. Like if an instrument was broken, you'd spend money on fixing that instrument, right?
Yes.
So spend money on looking after the people who are the principal instruments of this industry. So it has to be about money, I guess, and funding. And I'm often written in the access section of Arts Council funding bids. So that needs to be thought about a bit more. And I think people need, I think I'd encourage people to be courageous in working in a way that feels right, because I think we all know when it feels a bit wrong. We all know when we're off-piste, but we haven't yet got the courage to say, hey, I think something's off-kilter here. And sometimes we just don't know what it is, and it's hard to identify. But the more we do it, the better we will be at it. And we will learn how to be reflective practitioners. It will become second nature. It will become like, oh my, why didn't we do this like years ago? So I think the future is just start doing it, start being conscious, start asking really good questions in the room. Don't necessarily bring in these solutions that one size fit all. Just, begin a rehearsal process with the question, how are we going to look after ourselves and each other? And get people to answer it with meaning. Cut through the bullshit. Cut through the tick boxes. Don't just put it on a form and then put it in a cupboard. That doesn't work. Policies and strategies, they're really good, but they have to be alive. And then, get people to invest in it. And tell them why it's important as well. People might really just get on with the job. It's like, this is going to save money. If we're all kind of feeling a bit less stressed, we aren't going to have to do these really long hours. I really believe in that. Creativity will flow.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand By Please. Join us next time when we'll be chatting with Ryan Evans from One to One Motivation. Until then, Antonia and Jackie, off comms.